Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, as read by Lord Naren White. Everybody made a rush for the front door because, of course, a stranger don't come every year. So he lays over the yaller fever for interest. When he does come, Tom was over the stile and starting for the house. The wagon was spinning up the road for the village, and we was all bunched in the front door. Tom had his store clothes on, and an audience, and that was always nuts for Tom Sawyer. In them circumstances, it warn't no trouble to him to throw in an amount of style that was suitable. He warn't a boy to meeky along up that yard like a sheep. He come calm and important, like the ram. When he got a front of us, he lifts his hat ever so gracious and dainty, like it was the lid of a box that had butterflies asleep in it, and he didn't want to disturb them, and says, "Mr. Archibald Nichols, I presume?" "No, my boy," says the old gentleman. "I'm sorry to say that your driver has deceived you. Nichols's places are down a matter of 3 mile more. Come in, come in." Tom, he took a look back over his shoulder and says, "Too late. He's out of sight." "Yes, he's gone, my son. And you must come in and eat your dinner with us, and then we'll hitch up and we'll take you down to Nichols." "Oh, I can't make you so much trouble. I couldn't think of it. I'll walk. I don't mind the distance. But we won't let you walk. It wouldn't be Southern hospitality to do it. Come right in." "Oh, do," says Aunt Sally. "It ain't a bit of trouble to us, not a bit in the world. You must stay. It's a long, dusty 3 mile, and we can't let you walk. And, besides, I've already told him to put on another plate when I see you coming, so you mustn't disappoint us. Come right in and make yourself at home." So Tom, he thanked them very hearty and handsome, and let himself be persuaded and come in. And when he was in, he said he was a stranger from Hicksville, Ohio, and his name was William Thompson, and he made another bow. Well, he run on and on and on, making up stuff about Hicksville, and everybody in it he could invent, and I getting a little nervous, and wondering how this was going to help me out of my scrape, and at last, still talking along, he reached over and kissed Aunt Sally right on the mouth, and then settled back again in his chair comfortable, and was going on talking, but she jumped up and wiped it off with the back of her hand, and says, "You audacious puppy!" He looked kind of hurt, and says, "I'm surprised at you, ma'am. Why, what do you reckon I am? I've a good notion to take and say, what do you mean by kissing me?" He looked kind of humble and says, "I didn't mean nothing, ma'am. I didn't mean no harm. I thought you'd like it." "Why, you born fool." She took up the spinning stick, and it looked like it was all she could do to keep it from giving him a crack with it. "What made you think I'd like it?" "Well, I don't know. Only they told me you would." "They told you I would? Whoever told you's another lunatic? I never heard the beat of it. Who's they?" "Why, everybody. They all said so, ma'am." It was all she could do to hold in, and her eyes snapped, and her fingers worked like she wanted to scratch him, and she says, "Who's everybody? Out with their names, or there'll be another idiot short." He got up and looked distressed, and fumbled his hat, and says, "I'm sorry, and I weren't expecting it. They told me to. They all told me to. They all said, 'Kiss her,' and said she'd like it. They all said it, every one of them. But I'm sorry, ma'am, and I won't do it no more. I won't, honest." "No, you won't you? Well, I should reckon you won't." "No, I'm honest about it. I won't ever do it again, till you ask me." "Till I ask you?" "Well, I never seen the beat of it in my born days. I'll lay you'll be the Methuselah numbskull of creation before ever I ask you, or the likes of you." "Well," he says, It does surprise me so. I can't make it out somehow. They said you would, and I thought you would, but he stopped and looked around slow, like he wished he could run across a friendly eye somewheres, and fetched up on the old gentleman's and says, "Didn't you think she'd like me to kiss her, sir?" "Why, no, no, I believe I didn't." Then he looks on you around the same way to me and says, "Tom, didn't you think Aunt Sally open out her arms and say, 'Sid Sawyer'?" "My land," she says, breaking in and jumping for him, "you impudent young rascal, to fool a body so," and was going to hug him, but he fended her off and says, "No, not till you've asked me first." So she didn't lose no time, but asked him, and hugged him and kissed him over and over again, and then turned him over to the old man, and he took what was left. And after that they got a little quiet again. She says, "Why, dear me, I never see such a surprise. We weren't looking for you at all, but only Tom. Sis never wrote to me about anybody coming but him. It's because I weren't intended for any of us to come but Tom," he says. "But I begged and begged, and at the last minute, she let me come, too. So, coming down the river, me and Tom thought it would be a first-rate surprise for him to come here to the house first, and for me to by and by tag along and drop in, and let on to be a stranger. But it was a mistake. Aunt Sally, there ain't no healthy place for a stranger to come. No, not impudent whelp, Sid. You ought to had your jaws boxed. I ain't been so put out since I don't know when. But I don't care, I don't mind the terms. I'd be willing to stand 1,000 such jokes to have you here. Well, to think of that performance, I don't deny it. I was most purified with astonishment when you give me that smack." We had dinner out in the broad open passage betwixt the house and the kitchen, and there was things enough on that table for 7 families, and all hot too. None of your flabby, tough meat that's laid in a cupboard in a damp cellar all night and tastes like a hunk of old, cold cannibal in the morning. Uncle Silas, he asked a pretty long blessing over it, but it was worth it, and it didn't cool it a bit. Neither the way I've seen them kind of interruptions do lots of times. There was a considerable good deal of talk all the afternoon, and me and Tom was on the lookout all the time, but it warn't no use. They didn't happen to say another word about any runaway black, and we was afraid to try to work up to it. But at supper one night, one of the little boys says, "Pa, may not Tom and Sid and me go to the show?" "No," says the old man. "I reckon there ain't going to be any, and you couldn't go if there was, because the runaway black told Burton and me all about that scandalous show, and Burton said he would tell the people. So I reckon they've drove the audacious loafers out of the town before this time." So there it was, but I couldn't help it. Tom and me was to sleep in the same room and bed, so being tired, we bid good night and went up to the bed right after supper, and clumb out of the window and down the lightning rod and shoved for the town, for I didn't believe anybody was going to give the king and the duke a hint, and so if I didn't hurry up and give them one, they'd get into trouble sure. On the road, Tom, he told me all about how it was reckoned I was murdered, and how Pab disappeared pretty soon and didn't come back no more, and what a stir there was when Jim run away, and I told Tom all about our Royal Nonsuch, rapscallions, and as much of the raft voyage as I had time to. As we struck into the town and up through here comes a raging rush of people with torches, and an awful whooping and yelling and banging tin pans and blowing horns, and we jumped to one side to let them go by, and as they went I see they had the king and the duke astraddle of a rail. That is, I knowed it was the king and the duke, though they was all over tar and feathers, and didn't look like nothing in the world that was human. It just looked like a couple of monstrous big soldier plumes. Well, it made me sick to see it, and I was sorry for them poor pitiful rascals. It seemed like I couldn't ever feel any hardness against them any more in the world. It was a dreadful thing to see. Human beings can be awful cruel to one another. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.